Call on the member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the people of Macarthur, I rise to speak on the migration legislation amendment, offshore processing and other measures. The Coalition has had a clear message for the past 5 years. Our plan is simple: bring back the tried and tested policies that worked. Bring back offshore processing in Nauru, bring back temporary protection visas, remove the incentive to jump the queue and encourage people to wait their turn. Our policy has always been fair and equitable. Since Labor abolished these proven measures, almost 22,000 people have turned up on more than 375 boats. So far in 2012, we've seen an average of 1,000 people arrive each month, setting a new record for arrivals by month and year. This is twice the number of arrivals estimated in the government's budget, but has cumulatively blown out over the forward estimates by $4.7 billion during the past 3 years. I can understand why Australia is such an attractive choice for people living in difficult circumstances overseas. But with its bad policy, this Labor government has encouraged people to jump the queue and put their lives and their children's lives at risk. Since this Labor government came into office, we've had 386 boats arriving illegally, carrying 22,518 people. The cost to taxpayers for Labor's border protection failures since they abolished the Howard government's proven border protection measures has blown out by $4.7 billion, and we've seen illegal boats continue to arrive in record numbers and a record number of asylum seekers placed in detention or in the community. This is a very serious issue that people in my community raise with me on a regular basis. The people of Macarthur can see the urgent need for something to be done before more lives are lost as a result of this evil trade in people's lives. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's a sad fact that for too long those opposite have put their own interests ahead of the safety and well-being of people who live in the most vulnerable and difficult of circumstances. It was easy for this government to criticise the proven and successful policies of the Coalition by sidelining them as harsh, cruel and unkind. The Prime Minister herself said in 2003 that Labor will end the so-called Pacific solution, the processing and detaining of asylum seekers on Pacific Islands, because it is costly, unsustainable and wrong as a matter of principle. Mr Deputy Speaker, this Labor government claims to be strong on border security, but we've seen their policy fail time and time again. It was John Howard's policy that stopped the boats, stopped the people smugglers and stopped the deaths at sea. We need to send a strong message that if people are going to spend thousands of dollars to risk their lives to come to Australia, then they are going to be processed offshore. This message should not be clouded under any circumstances. Today, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government is backflipping on what in 2008 the then Immigration Minister declared was the proudest day of his life. Why has it taken the government 4 years to work out that they have created this problem and that their policy has failed? Since the Coalition's compromise was rejected 6 weeks ago, 47 boats carrying 2,815 people have arrived on our shores. Since Labor's Malaysia People Swap failed in the High Court, 146 boats carrying more than 10,000 people turned up. Since our abolition of temporary protection visas, 386 boats and 22,518 people have turned up on our shores. And the saddest part of all this, Mr Deputy Speaker, isn't the $4.7 billion worth of budget blowouts. It's more than the 1,000 people that have perished at sea. This is not a time for stubbornness or grandstanding, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is a time for action. The people of Macarthur have been rightly concerned about the border protection crisis created by this government. This Friday, I will host a community forum on immigration and border security with the Shadow Minister for Immigration, the member for Cook, who has continuously held out the olive branch to the government. So far, more than 160 residents of Macarthur have signed up to attend so they can raise their concerns with me and the Shadow Minister about this government's border protection crisis. This sends a strong message and a clear message to the government: fix the problem, implement a real solution and stop endangering the lives of men, women and children in some of the most vulnerable and difficult situations in the world. Another strong and clear endorsement of the tried and tested policies of the Coalition is in the Houston panel report. This report made 22 recommendations, including establishing offshore processing in Nauru and Manus Island, introducing legislation to allow offshore processing of illegal boat arrivals at designated countries, prohibiting family reunion through Australia's humanitarian program for people arriving by boat, and instead of making illegal boat arrivals apply for family reunion through the family stream of migration program, and a no advantage test over asylum seekers waiting to enter the country illegally. The report also highlights that turning back irregular maritime vessels can be done and can be an effective deterrent to the product being peddled by the people smugglers. The last and most effective deterrent to the people smuggling trade is temporary protection visas, which the Prime Minister has stubbornly ruled out. This is just another reason why the people of Macarthur are frustrated with this government's continual preference for politics over people. I've door-knocked my electorate recently, Mr Deputy Speaker, and one of the most common issues residents have brought up with me is illegal boat arrivals. They can see that the government's current policy is not working, and they understand the urgency for something to be done to stop this illegal trade. For 4 years, this government has said that offshore processing at Nauru would not work, that it would cost billions of dollars to set up, and that boats could not be turned around. During this time, hundreds of lives have been lost at sea. Our nation has damaged its reputation with its neighbours, costs are blown out by incredible amounts, and people smuggling trade has boomed. Mr Deputy Speaker, I support this legislation, but as my colleagues have said before me, reopening Nauru is not the entire solution to stopping the boats. All the measures of the Howard government need to be implemented to solve this problem, including temporary protection visas and actively turning back the boats where it is safe to do so.